thank you also for hosting this meeting, this roundtable. As many of you know, we wanted to actually have this live. This is the second opening of the Graffitied Memoryscapes exhibition, so we'll just keep opening it every few months. Maybe one of these times it'll actually be live. But the exhibition is now on campus, the University of Rijeka. So any of you who are in the Rijeka or passing through, I think it'll still be up for another 2 weeks or something. Roswitha, maybe you know the exact date. So again, good afternoon to everybody, and especially some of my students who have been studying also the interaction of ideology, politics, history, and cultural products and culture. And they've watched the film Exit Through the Gift Shop last week, so they've been well-versed in street art and other types of graffiti. And hopefully some of the material we'll be showing as part of our exhibition will be of interest to them, but also the other colleagues also from the SAS fellows and other friends and colleagues that are here. So the exhibition was created by 4 of us, the 4 authors that are here, and we'll go through each of our panels, hopefully just a brief part of it, and Kevin will be live DJing and mixing and curating the exhibition on what is the name of this program you have? I always forget. It's not PowerPoint, it's Prezi, thank you. Yeah, so again, the exhibition, we were hoping for the opening, hoping for a little bit more interaction with some book presentations and maybe even some live walks through Rijeka, but the advantage of doing it on Zoom, we have maybe even a bigger audience, and we have some other additional commentators, Katarina and Kostas, who will join us for the second part to maybe comment upon some of the images that we have. So I'd like to just introduce the other authors and my colleagues. I'll go in the order that we'll be presenting. So we have Eric Ušić, who's a PhD student at the University of Ljubljana. He's an alumni of, or alumnus of the Cultural Studies Department at the University of Rijeka, and the 2 of us have done quite a bit of field work throughout Istra, and he's going to be presenting some of the material that he's working on his PhD, which are these post-World War II and some during World War II slogans that you can still see throughout Istria. And then Roswitha Kersten-Pejanić, who's a postdoc fellow at the Center for Advanced Studies in Southeastern Europe, and she also holds a research fellowship by the German Research Foundation, the DFG, and it's her ongoing project, Linguistic Landscapes at the Margins. And actually was Roswitha's idea to have this exhibition, and you know, thanks a lot to her for all the hard work and getting the funding and actually setting up both of the exhibitions. I actually wasn't even there for the setting it up, so she's really the driving force behind this exhibition. And then we have Kevin Kenjar, who's got his PhD at UC Berkeley last year in anthropology. And he was working on memory and landscapes focused on Sarajevo, actually, but in our conversations, he was saying that he was collecting graffiti. Actually, I believe graffiti was one of the earlier goals of the PhD. So he had a lot of material. And then when we had a chance to meet, when he came to Rijeka as also a postdoc fellow at the Center for Advanced Studies, we decided to include his material, and it's been great. And he also will show us a little bit of a video at the end and the transformation of some of these graffiti. I think it should be pretty interesting. So I think we can go to the next slide and maybe give some shout outs to the supporters of this. And the original exhibition was also part of the Rijeka 2020, it was at Export Drvo. It was also part of one of the projects that I had, which was Rijeka Memoryscapes. And maybe some of you have already had a chance to see it when it was at Export Drvo. It was actually a pretty cool place to have this exhibition, a little bit of a post-industrial kind of landscape. And then there we had several other supporters, and I think Roswitha, maybe you can jump in here and help with the appropriate thanks for our supporters.
Sure. Do you mean I should say the German institutions? So yeah, it was really, I mean, you know, doing such an exhibition needs a support team, and we're really grateful actually to have had not only the financial support and the funding by these organizations here, especially of course the European Capital of Culture, Rijeka 2020, but also the Schubeck Fonds Östliches Europa and the Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft, who were really, I mean, who stepped in, gave us money to actually get our work on these big posters you could see on the campus if you happen to be able to travel there or even work there. So yeah, but I would also like to say thank you to, of course, the cast team and the whole organizational support that we received actually around it. So Lucia Polonio helped us with, you know, not only advertising everything, but also took nice pictures at Export Drvo, which Kevin can probably show you in a minute, as maybe a few, some of you might have actually seen it at Export Drvo. And also, you know, to have these things on paper and to have them in the form they are in was also able, thanks to Kuna Zlatica, Anna Kunaj in Zagreb, the designer, and Tiskara Sušak with Robert Rukavina, the printer here in Rijeka. So I just, you know, wanted to say that there are more people behind this than the four of us. So to make sure that they are all named here and that we keep that in mind. Will you go on, Vjeran, or should I say something on the exhibition? I think you did say what we need, and then we could go.
I did see, but maybe you could comment because you happened, or you or Kevin, because you happened to be at the opening. And I mean, I would just also say, yeah, there was a big support team, and putting together a exhibition is so much more difficult than writing an article by yourself, and especially with all these visuals, because you have to coordinate so many different moving parts. And again, you know, I'd like to thank all three of my, especially the colleagues that are the co-authors that we made this happen, but also, yeah, the people behind the scenes who did it. So maybe if you wanted to say just a few words about the opening there and the opening on campus with these images.
Sure. I mean, it was kind of a surprise in December that we were able to show it in Export Drvo, which we initially hadn't planned, but we were to have it here on campus. So we, you know, put an effort into having it set up all very, very quickly, and I think it worked out very well at Export Drvo, which is a very nice place actually to show exhibitions. And there were people there. Not, I mean, we see three of our colleagues here at the opening, which was great. And also I should also say that there also we had a great support team, of course, and it was really helpful to not be left on our own. And maybe I should also say that, you know, some of the idea behind the exhibition was also, you know, reaching out, of course, going beyond academia here. And I think this is, yeah, kind of a privilege with the material we're working on, that it is kind of very relatable, and it is part of everyday culture. So we're really able to, you know, to show some of the stuff we're doing here. And also, I think it's just very nice that the 4 projects that are in the exhibition are very nicely complementary. So, I mean, you will see them all in a minute or hear about them. But what I think is really yeah, very beneficial for the whole project here of the exhibition is that we all do look at graffiti and political graffiti more or less, but we have very different perspectives and very different research backgrounds also. So yeah, like interdisciplinarity, of course, has been a very important factor here in our work, but also I think I would say the relatability of our material, which makes it so nice to actually go beyond, you know, academic research and show it. And I think that's it from my side. Do we have a campus picture? Yeah, this is where the exhibition is now. And unfortunately, due to the lockdown last week, there wasn't a ceremony or anything. So this is what we're having today here, which is really cool too. But of course, I would love you all to, you know, go and see the exhibition if you have the opportunity. And it's actually, it looks really nice out there in the sun. And I can only, you know, recommend you. And here again, you know, talking of support teams, Rijeka is really great with that. They have this huge group of people working in technical service. So it was I don't know, a matter of 15 minutes or something to set up the 20 posters here, and it went really well and very smoothly. And was a great experience also to have this, you know, these people actually working the stuff, which was really cool. So yeah, you can see it up there in the sun, and we will now have a look at the individual posters, starting with Eric's part, which is the first 4 posters of the exhibition. So please, Eric.
Okay, hi to everyone. I'm really glad to be participating in this project. As Roswitha said, I think these 4 researchers are complementary with each other. And as Vjeran already announced, I'm doing a research now for 2 years back about political graffiti written during and mostly after World War II in Istria. And what is important to stress out at the beginning is that these graffiti are not, let's say, some specific inscriptions only for the Istrian region. They were produced all around the ex-Yugoslavia during the war, and especially in Istria and the Slovenian littoral from 1945 to 1946, as well as in other parts that were imagined as part of Yugoslavia, for example, the city of Trieste. So in order to introduce this topic, a short historical context. So as I already said, during the war, the partisans were using different media and symbolic weapons in their struggle. And one of the weapons were graffiti. So political graffiti understood as weapons of, let's say, public inscription of messages from the resistance movement as attempts to mobilize the people and new fighters, and simply to provoke the fascist governments, as well as to mark the territory. And marking the territory was especially important during the liberation phase. So graffiti were written as the partisans were moving forward. They were leaving their, let's say, wall marks behind them, or were even, let's say, acclaimed by local people when entering the town with new inscription. However, the most important phase of graffiti writing in Istria, Slovenian littoral, Trieste and Rijeka, was in 1945-46. So after the war, while the region was divided into 2 zones, the A and B zones, one administered by the Allied military government, the other one by the Yugoslav military government. So in March 1946, an inter-allied commission visited Istria in order to inspect, let's say, the situation in the region. And the pro-Yugoslav side started a massive propaganda enterprise, and one important aspect of it was graffiti writing. So I encountered in secondary literature and archives some interesting information that more than 800,000 graffiti were written. However, that's very difficult to confirm, but even to let's say dismiss as a false information, because it's impossible to count all of them. During my research, so 75 years after all these events, I found more than 2,000 graffiti, and I didn't inspect even 50% of the region. So let's say that this historical context is very important in order to simply understand what these writings are, because starting from myself, I would say that my research has a strong autobiographical note since I'm living and I'm coming from a small town near Pula, Vjeran, that is full of this red inscription. In Vjeran, they are written only in Italian, since that was an Italian town. I mean, the majority of the population were Italian. So in those areas where the majority of the people were Italian, the graffiti were written in Italian, while in other parts in Croatian or Slovenian. So for years, I always seen these writings, but I never, let's say, noticed them. So I didn't know what they are and what do they mean. So I started to dig a little bit and found this huge unexplored topic. This photo that Kevin is zooming now is from Sveta Lucija near Opertal, and it says how many fighters the Motovun district gave in the struggle for the annexion to Yugoslavia. So that's let's say a clear and straight message for the Inter-Allied Commission visiting the region. An interesting thing is that no one knew where this commission will pass, so they were writing graffiti all around the region. Viva il potere popolare, long live the people's government, was let's say a standard slogan from the period. And as you can see, we can move forward maybe to the next panel, where the focus is on war graffiti and liberation graffiti. So from symbols as hammers and sickles, red stars. Maybe if you can zoom the one on the right, that is very interesting. Yes, this is near the town of Tar. Okay, this is of the Yugoslavia. So that's the starting of let's say the territorialization, I would say. So the marking of this new Yugoslavia yet to come. So this graffiti were written, let's say, in pre-Yugoslav times, but survived their own, let's say, vision of their own future. This one is interesting because it's situated in a very, very small town. It maybe has, I don't know, 10 houses and maybe 5 people live in it. And I don't know if you can see the photo well, but it's written Živio Tito, Churchill, Roosevelt. So what I found interesting in these writings is not only their quantity or quality, but even these, let's say, small nuances of grammar and of writing and interpretation and reinterpretation of let's say, dominant narratives and ideological patterns. And here is what is interesting in this one that Kevin showed is that Stalin is missing from this big tree. Let's say it's only Tito, Churchill, and Roosevelt. The one up on the right, Živjela Dalmatinska proletarska brigada. So that's one example of writings that were produced during the liberation phase. What is difficult when researching historical example of graffiti as this one is to exactly determine their, I don't know, date or even month of production. So I mean, it's always something approximate, let's say, but regarding the slogans, this one has nothing to do with the Inter-Allied Commission, since the Inter-Allied Commission had to inspect the ethnic, cultural, and historical aspects of the region and draw ethnic lines of the borders. Of course, every member of the French, Soviet, British, and American delegation had their own conception of where the border had to be drawn. And now we can move to the next panel that is focusing especially on this post-war graffiti. For example, starting from the left, mi tuđe nećemo, svoje ne damo. So let's say the classic slogan derived from Tito's speech in I think the island of Vis. So we want Tito with, and the other one is from Kringa, the next one, saying very explicitly, we want Tito, we don't want King Peter. And that's an old building in this town, an old school, and they actually used these huge buildings from the Austrian or Italian period in order to write. This one, Sempre con Tito, it's maybe 20 meters from my home, so it's not strange that I'm doing this research. Probably now it's more, I think, very, very clear why I'm doing this. And this is a very huge writing, and says vogliamo che sia rispettata la Carta Atlantica. So we want, let's say, the respect or the implementation of the Atlantic Charter, and always with Tito. As I mentioned, the ethnic component was very important. So the pro-Yugoslav activists were writing graffiti as this one: Istra je Hrvatska, Hrvatska mora bit. So Istra is Croatian, and it has to be Croatian. So what I found interesting is that on one side, they emphasize this Croatian and Slavic background of Istria, while on the other, simultaneously, they were emphasizing this multicultural and, or better said, bicultural Croatian and Italian background of Istria. So it was important to show that even the Italians were for Tito, as you can see on this on the right. If you can go, Kevin, please. This one is written in Italian, in the town of Vrsar or Sera. Vogliamo la Jugoslavia di. So we want the Yugoslavia of, and probably it was written Tito. I don't think that they wrote of King Peter in that period, because I didn't encounter any let's say anti-Yugoslav or I don't know, even anti-communist graffiti in the post-war period. Of course, during the war they were fascist graffiti too, and some of them are still existing in Istria. This one, so the last photo, is situated near the one that Kevin zoomed from the panel before. So how many fighters the Motovun district gave in their struggle for the, say, annexation of the Julian March, so from the Julijska Krajina, Venetia Julia, to the Democratic Federative People's Republic of Yugoslavia. And what I think it's very interesting with this graffiti is that there are even some examples. I did not include them in this exhibition, where you can see that someone even tried to erase them, but they are still emerging from the facade. So I don't know what color they used. I mean, what was this paint? I was lucky to interview some of the writers of these graffitis, so people who participated in this project, let's say, and even they didn't know what they were using while writing this. But from other documents and sources, I found out that they used the strong paint that is used for ships and trains and let's say stuff like that. So a heavy industrial paint. And then we can move to the next. I don't know if that's probably the last. Yes, the last one with more photos. As you can see, a variety of symbols, from flags, red stars, hammers, and sickles to I don't know, to some combination of both with this Viva Stalin, so long live Stalin. That's even close to my home, so I grew up near these writings on the walls. This one is written in Italian with these symbols, the W meaning Viva, so long live. And if you can zoom the one on the left, where Yugoslavia is written on, this is a building of an old school too. As you can see, they were covered by a newer layer of a facade, but the facade fell off and they re-emerged. So let's say it's like a subcultural subconscious of the region that is continuously going on, because I while speaking about this graffiti, what I want to stress out is that I understand them as a kind of open air archives, let's say. So roaming around the region, finding these fragments of history, these traces of a very important historical episode for the region, since after that the situation radically changed. I mean, after that nothing was the same anymore. As all you know, the exodus of the Italian population, the change of borders, and so on. I mean, we are still living the effects of the period in which these graffiti were written. Furthermore, what I found interesting during my field work is that actually people still live in objects on whose walls there are still some Stalin, Tito, and graffiti like this, but they didn't seem to bother very much about them. I think that the main reaction is that I don't know. I mean, these are historical traces, so I don't want to erase them. They don't bother me. We are okay with that. So the next phase of my research will be to go a little bit deeper into this, let's say, interaction with people living in houses on which graffiti are written. For example, this white Viva Tito lady is living here, and she told me that she wants to preserve this one. So let's say that these graffiti still have some kind of social life, if I can say it like that. I even found some examples where people were even trying to let's say renovate some of this graffiti. Unfortunately, that came after we already did this panel, so these are some, let's say, fresh findings, because the field work, as you know, never ends, especially with this graffiti in history. I mean, you can find them wherever you go. So I think that a word or two about methodology, and then I will go, and then we can go on. In my research, I'm applying a visual ethnographic method, as I think it's very clear from these panels, because I think that photography is not only a method for, I don't know, documenting, but even for preserving these writings, and to create. That's what my ambition is, to create an open archive in order to collect all of them in one place. Since I don't know, 2 or 3 days ago, I passed with my car near Vjeran, and I saw a renovation of a house where some graffiti were written, and I almost cried. But it was really sad to see the parts of history just fading away, since they are not protected. I mean, the messages are not very, let's say, so not in this post-Yugoslav period. I think that's somehow controversial, I think. But okay, for me, maybe we can go in deeper later.
Well, maybe I'll just follow up a little bit with Eddie, because you were mentioning about your field work, and as I said, there's a lot of some of my students listening, and maybe they're also interested in moving forward. And just the fact that tracking these down is such a systematic work, and as you have to go from village to village. We don't know where these are, and Edic's ability to see and read these, he can spot it from, a kilometer away. He can see a letter, and these really are like fragments at times. And it's also fascinating, as we've seen on some of the walls where the facades, they were completely covered up, and yet now they're being exposed again. So maybe there'll be another cycle of broken facades, but the preserving them, I think, is also very important. And the fact that you mentioned some people live with these slogans, but we've also spoken to some people, and they turn and they look, they're like, oh wow, there is something here. They've been living there for years, and they didn't even notice there was a giant Tito or a flag next to them. So it's that visibility and invisibility. I mean, for me, I usually look at the monuments, but also for these graffiti, and it's fascinating once you start reading the graffiti. And I think all 4 of us, and probably all the other people on the panel, once you start reading and seeing it, then you can't help but see it everywhere.
Yeah.
So now we'll go to, thank you, Eric. And this was like a very nice introduction, the historical aspect. And now we'll go to Roswitha, and she's been working on these linguistic landscapes in another post-war period, in post-war Croatia. And it's not just, graffiti or murals, but all of these symbols and signs. And so her panels looked at a lot more of these, all kinds of words and symbols and language that we see in the everyday landscape. So Roswitha?
Yeah, thank you. I did try to, concentrate on graffiti, but at some point, the rest of the group told me that I wasn't really. So I mean, this is part of my material, of course, because I'm really looking at the general linguistic landscape, and just reducing it to the graffiti sometimes is hard for me because there's so much interrelated to the other things, the other parts of my material. So I'll just give you a very brief overview here. As Vjeran said, I'm working on linguistic landscapes at the margins, as I call it here, post-conflict Croatian border regions, which are first of the region around Vukovar, very ruralized area, and another core field region is the area at the Una border river, at that specific part of Croatia, which also happens to be in the news now a lot because of the earthquake having its center in Petrinja, which is pretty close to where I'm taking my pictures also. So, I'm always jealous a bit that Eric has this nice positive relation to his material, which is sometimes lacking in my analytical approach here, but it also has to do, of course, with the very still very contested landscape I'm dealing with, although it is clearly, of course, Croatianized, and it's also the linguistic landscape is very clearly turned into or turned the landscape into a not only Croatian but proud Croatian landscape. So it's very, very clear that there has been this very horrible recent history, and actually, traveling the areas, you can see this at very, very many instances. And I also like to look at monuments as Vjeran does, because I mean they also give you the picture of the whole post-conflict visual elements you find in the area. And we can go on to the next slide, Kevin. Yeah, since I'm coming to this research with my very linguistic background or social linguistic background, I do look a lot at the politics of language and script, and this is something where Katarina later also will probably tell us some insights. Yeah, and of course the thing here is also that the linguistic, the linguistic choices are already highly contested, as you can see on this picture. So digraphia, bilingual signs, if you want to, say they are bilingual, this is some different discussion here. But there are clearly digraphic, so there are two scripts. They are biscriptal, if you want. And in some areas, they go totally unnoticed again, and in some areas they don't. So the picture that Kevin just showed you was in Dvor, where there is no visual intervention taking part here, whereas in Vukovar there's a lot of erasure going on and still staying on the walls. So there are signs made invisible. There are just just a lot of interaction going on here. And the Vukovar, nikad neće biti Vukovar, with the second Vukovar in Cyrillic letters, is the known claim here, which is related to the 2013 movement, very clearly going against the linguistic minority rights here in the area. I'm just, yeah, I think we can go. Well, what I'm trying to say here with the other instances, which are not graffitis, of course, on this specific poster, is that, of course, linguistic cohabitation of different languages is possible, as you can see in the instances. Also, if you go up to the two upper pictures, for example, in Czech communities in Croatia, or even you know, if the name of the town is exactly the same, they still stand next to each other here to show the bilingualist approach here to the public space, or in this instance the nice cohabitation on a monument plate of Hungarian and Croatian, which is not contested at all. Let's go to the next slide, on the next poster, please. Thank you. So this is also very related to my to my linguistic perspective here, landscape of belonging and national identity, and how they are you know, claimed via linguistic meaning making in the public space. And for example, the upper picture is from the museum of the town of Vukovar. Again, I'm sorry, it's not a graffiti, but it's related, of course, to the many graffitis around Vukovar these days, you know, making very clear that Cyrillic should not have its place in Vukovar. So here a picture from 1992 saying Vukovar Godina Prva in Cyrillic. And of course, this shows us that Cyrillic has had its place, of course, in the conflict on the Serbian side, and was a very important symbolic or symbol for Serbian for the Serbian political side at that time. And hence it you know is contested a lot. So the historical layers are also very important here, but are not what I can find on the walls these days. So this is also very different from Eric's material, because everything, let's say, Serbian is erased in these areas and does not have its place anymore. Can go to the next poster. Yeah, these are some, and this, I mean, there's a lot to say. I'm just trying to be short here. A very big part of my material, unfortunately, is linguistic violence and hate speech, which is also important for understanding maybe also my approach, but also the region. For example, the ZDC, Zadom Spremni is like pretty much everywhere. But if you go to the upper picture of the SDSS poster, for example, with where the SDSS for the European Parliament elections in 2020 had this very nice campaign from a linguistic standpoint of mixing Cyrillic and Latin script on the election posters. And this one, you can't read it, but it says Rođen u Hrvatskoj, and the Rođen U is in Cyrillic, and the rest in Latin. And you see that there are heavy reactions to such public use of the Cyrillic script here, and that is also one of the issues, of course, with the whole research I'm having here, is that, you know, all calls for mutual acceptance or appreciation or demands of, you know, alternative politics in the sense of being able to live together and still be different are very easily answered by or with nationalist or exclusionary rhetoric. So this is what I find a lot in my material. And this is also, I think, my last poster. And we can go on with Vjeran.
Well, also Roswitha, with a little bit of your, field work, because one of the challenges for coming up with an exhibition was to make it both visually interesting and have this some theory and methodology in our posters. And I know that a lot of what you were taking was also done from the car, because again, this field work, it's more difficult. We don't know when it's going to pop up, and sometimes we just snap a photo from a moving car. And I know some of your signs were like that. And I think especially the ones, Hrvatska kuća, we can see very similar marking, just like as an edX presentation. Of course, that was more systematic, and from a propaganda point, these were maybe individuals interacting. But again, it's these like border areas and contested areas for that. So I guess we could go on to mine. I think I'm the third panelist. Yeah, so I'll be maybe a little bit more brief, because I didn't really develop such a theoretical framework for my research as the other three who would really work on graffiti. So I'm a little bit of the outsider here, and I was interested in graffiti as sites of memory. And those of you who have listened to some of my lectures in the past, or read my work, know that I focus mostly on commemorations and monuments. But when I met Roswitha actually in Pristina, and we had a chance to share each other's research, I was like, I also have a bunch of this graffiti. And then that sort of started the ball rolling on our project. And so then I went through a lot of my images, and what I was interested for this exhibition was graffiti that is on monuments, or monuments that's on graffiti. And I think we haven't really even discussed and defined what could be graffiti. Is it street art? Is it vandalism? Is it political messages? Is it just putting one symbol over another? Or even such murals, for example, which maybe I guess is a whole nother category. And I think maybe I have a few at the very end. But so I guess those were some of the questions that I was interested in, and the reappropriation of sites of memory, perhaps, especially related to, let's say, the socialist period, that are then usually attacked or defaced as part of whatever the transition was, whether it was violent or not. And then we saw some of those like scratchings out in the previous panel, but in this one we can see explicitly the placing of other political messages and other symbols on this. And this is related to Roswitha's text about this violence, the violence of graffiti. Yeah, maybe zoom in on one of them. And there's sometimes even kind of clever phrases that you can find them on the various sites. This is from the Bogdanović's partisan cemetery in Mostar, which was cleaned up. So this is gone. Thinking about, what, Eric, when you're kind of sad that some graffiti is gone, but, that's the nature of it. It could be ephemeral. It's there briefly and then disappears, thankfully for some, because there's, quite a bit of these very, offensive symbols maybe. And then they don't make paint like they used to, because the ones that are across Istra definitely last. And yeah, so we can see that using one symbol to cover another symbol that was there previously. And it's part of the destruction of the monuments that we know took place throughout the former Yugoslavia, especially through Croatia. These are from all over the former Yugoslavia. Down there in the bottom left, we also see in Serbia. So it's not just a Croatian phenomenon, even though maybe there were more destruction in Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina than in some other places, but we can see a lot of this, well, anti-communist messages, even though this is a place of, suffering and death, yet they're, being defaced. So maybe we can go on to the next one. And then I thought it was also interesting, these small interventions, which are not as visible as the bigger vandalism attempts, but it's that, yeah, you can maybe zoom in on that one. Or I like the one of the, again, whether this is just some local kids doing this or is it like deliberate. I thought this, yeah, this one of the destroyed monument, which itself is a fascinating composition, because in the back you can see the main part of the monument still stands, and then the figure has been knocked down. This is on the near Makarska, and then he's been added some lipstick and some eyes, so an additional flair, I guess. Or at the bottom there in the middle, we can see in Macedonia there was some kind of political graffiti related to contemporary political debates, and then added onto that monument. So it's not defacing it per se, but it's just using it as another blank wall. So I thought that was also interesting. And the one on the right with the red paint, is it meant to completely deface it, or it's almost adding to the color? So there's a lot of these small interventions, which I think many of you have also maybe seen just walking around. So it's not, is it always ideological? Probably not. Sometimes it's just another wall to write on. And then we can look at the third, or sorry, my last panel. And I think I have some more of the murals. And again, those of you who have been tormented by some of my social media posts has definitely seen a lot of murals in Arizona, which are more artistic, but here we actually also see very, politicized murals. And this is what I was saying, monuments on murals, which I also find very interesting, because it's then, replicating a monument that exists. And of course, maybe one of the most famous ones is the Vukovar water tower, which is replicated on many walls and murals, and we can see how it's an important site of memory. And this new trend, especially in Zagreb, but I think in other places as well, and a lot of these, I guess we can call them ultras or football fans, combining with veterans to create very impressive sort of military murals. I didn't have any on here because this, I found, just like Eric, the field work never ends. You can keep going and tracking it down. And I think also my message for especially for the students who are attending, it's the writing is on the wall, and I think we can learn a lot by reading it. And again, it was a pleasure working with the other colleagues, because we all approached it from this different interdisciplinary way, and we each see different writings. But I think there's a lot more to be done, and hopefully then in next month we'll have Onceres. Roswitha is organizing another conference on semiotics, and hopefully I'll get a chance to present more about these military murals and so on. But sometimes when there isn't a physical monument, a mural can also, or graffiti can function as this site of memory. So that's kind of the direction I'm moving in for that. So let's now move on to our last presenter, and Kevin, who's been doing a great job here of moving around through our exhibition. And now he has a chance to take full control. So Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So we've talked a little bit about how graffiti can be ephemeral, how in the case of Eric's graffiti, we see that it's lasted decades. You can find graffiti in Pompeii that has lasted millennia. And at the same time, like if you were to put up, let's say, some Serbian nationalist graffiti in Imotski, it probably wouldn't last more than a few minutes. So it really depends on where it is, but really what happens is like the graffiti doesn't go away on its own. It comes to an end through intervention. And so my part here is to focus on the kinds of intervention that lead to the disappearance of graffiti. And so graffiti has, like other forms of signage in public space, has a kind of unique set of properties where in a way it's like people speaking, in that, you know, it's physically located in a place just like someone speaking, but when someone is done speaking, the message is gone. Graffiti, however, can last for quite a long time unless there's an interruption being made. And so I've been looking at the different forms of interruption and intervention that bring about the end to graffiti. So in this first one, I kind of focus on effacement, which is really when graffiti is simply covered up. And we can see some examples here, like a swastika that's been painted over, and you can see it's still kind of coming through. And of course, just covering up graffiti isn't ideologically neutral. In the case of Eric's graffiti, we can see that, you know, painting over some of this historical graffiti does have an effect. And with Roswitha, the fact that, you know, we have such hate speech that hasn't been covered over, it also has a message, right? So in these examples, I'm showing basically the simple ways that, you know, here we have an Ustaša U that's been painted over. I believe this was in Zagreb. And here we have an example where someone had painted over graffiti and someone came in right after it and simply wrote like, you did this for nothing, jobless the. So these are just some examples. This one, it shows how when you paint over graffiti, it doesn't simply erase everything, but rather it kind of creates a new canvas. And in this way is something of an invitation for other people to act. I previously did work at the Partisan Cemetery in Mostar, where you would find hate speech covering the cemetery. It'd be painted over, and then you'd immediately find another layer of hate speech on top of it. You know, it's this kind of back and forth, where each time it was seen as a new opportunity to act. So this is the main idea with effacement. It's not the only way to intervene. Another one is simply to cross it out, or scratch it out. So here we have an example of an Ustaša U that's been crossed out. In this case, the H that's been crossed out was part of the original graffiti, because the D here is Dinamo, U is Ustaša, and the H is anti-Hajduk. And so the crossing out of the H was original, and then some Hajduk supporters have crossed out the U. Another example, this is one that's been almost completely crossed out and is no longer legible. While in other times you do see through and it remains legible. In this case, it's some left-wing graffiti in Zagreb of Crvena akcija that's been crossed out by people using black. And the color is actually quite important because you can get a sense of who's doing what. Red is typically used by left-wing factions, while black is variously used by anarchists or fascists. Usually humorous graffiti or drug-related graffiti is in green. And of course, each city kind of has their own codes. So blue might be pro-Dinamo and Croatian nationalist in Zagreb, but blue appearing in Belgrade is usually connected with football supporters of the group Rad, who are Serbian nationalists. So it's kind of all over. You really have to get a sense of the territory to understand. Here's another example. This again is bigraphic, where you have it switch from Latin to Cyrillic. And here, Vukovar is for everyone. You see that everyone has been crossed out. Again, an example of this kind of crossing out. So In this one, we'll talk about this more later. It comes up again. So moving on, we can also see a kind of engagement where, again, because graffiti is spatially situated, you don't have to cross it out or paint over it to actually intervene. Someone can simply write next to it. And because it shares the same kind of physical space, you end up in a dialogue with it and you change the original content in the same way that someone can shout over someone who's talking. So in these examples, here we have one, this is in Vukovar, one of the few non-nationalist graffiti in Vukovar. Someone had written "Punk's not dead," and someone else had written above it, "Jeboti punk sestru." So the punk, fuck your sister. Here we have one from Zadar, where we have a Porto Maltese wondering what is wrong with the city, and someone came and gave their answer, "Hadeze." So again, it kind of invites this engagement, and we have various examples of engagement. You can find conversations between two leftists, for example. This one is on Savska Cesta in Zagreb, and someone had written "factories to the workers." That brought about the response, "What factories," right? Because of course, today they're mostly closed. And here we have a more complicated one where we have multiple layers of engagement. The initial layer, someone had written "red action" with a hammering sickle, and someone else had added in black "scum," gamad, and then someone else again in red had written "your parents," referring to scum. So again, this shows how these walls actually kind of facilitate a kind of conversation that's occurring between different factions, largely between people who will never actually meet face to face. And they probably wouldn't know if they did. And unlike speaking, the intervals between these moments in the conversation could last many years. Like Sevna Aksia could have been here for a decade before someone decided to respond. You would never really know. You kind of only get the sense of the completed conversation when you're looking. So moving on to the last form I'll be discussing, which I think is kind of the most interesting one, is a term détournement, which comes from French, obviously. And it refers, I think, originally to hijacking, but it's the style where you make minor interventions. This emerged with the Situationists, by the way. You make minor interventions to hijack the original graffiti. In this case, you're not responding to it, you're not canceling it out, but you're taking it over. So here's one from Radnička Fronta in Zagreb, who had taken a banner for Konzum and hijacked it to ask for Konzum to be returned to the workers. Here we have another example. This is the original layer. This is from Mostar, where you have fascism živi, long live fascism, with the Ustaša U and the swastika, and the response came with feminism živi. And here we have, people who did not like what they saw on the walls in their city and decided to do something about it. This one is from Serbia. The original layer occurred in the context of the Pride Parade that happened in Belgrade, where someone had written some homophobic graffiti saying "Pedar neće šetati," so the fag will not walk or march. And here we have an intervention being made, "Pedar neće smetati," not going to bother anymore. So again, this is this kind of clever intervention that people make. And finally, we have this example. This is kind of a classic one that you find all over Zagreb and increasingly around Croatia, where the original layer you have on Ustaša U, and someone has transformed it into a penis through the addition of a few lines and added the phrase "Kaje papsi," which is like, "What up, suckers?" So again, these are very minor interventions that people make. This one involves more. And I've noticed in my field work that the more minor the intervention, while still being able to hijack the message, gets a better response from people, where people recognize it as a game. And so this kind of move that you can make of making a small intervention to completely change the message is seen as a skill that people develop. And so you can simply cross something out and people might be glad that it's gone. However, this idea that you can make a small change, like there's some neo-Nazi graffiti in Serbia that says nacionalni stroj, like national rank, national file. And it's been changed to racionalni broj, like rational number. And this, of course, became quite popular when it happened. And now I've noticed I could no longer find nacionalni stroj graffiti in Serbia because it's all become racionalni broj. It kind of spread from this initial intervention and became a recognized way of intervening. And I would say the same is the case with the Ustasha penis. So I'm going to end this with a short video that I made showing how these interventions happen using real examples that I found throughout the region. And because you normally wouldn't see these interventions happen, the beauty of media gives us the chance to see them happen in real time. Originally, as you might have seen in the first slides of the Export Durbo exhibition, this video was projected onto a wall to simulate real graffiti. We can't, unfortunately, bring you that, but we will put it on your screens and hopefully that will be something. So I'll move on to this now.
Thank you, Kevin, for that live action video. In fact, also for the Export Drvo exhibition, we had hoped to have like a blank wall and people could come in there and spray on them, but yeah, that wasn't quite possible. And I liked this idea of the conversation that's going on the walls. But interestingly, going back to Eric's work, you know, very few of those have been intervened, even the Stalin ones. They're just kind of preserved forever. So in that sense, those are not touched. And then reflecting on, sorry, I'm bringing up Arizona again, but there's almost no graffiti on the walls other than this artistic murals. And that's because, you know, the context of Southern Arizona and Tucson was gangs were using the graffiti. So I think in the 80s and 90s, there was a huge effort to like completely end all graffiti. I mean, it was a community effort. They were painting it over and to just get rid of that. So there's very little writing on the wall other than this new explosion of artistic murals. So I'm wondering now with the rest of the authors, do we want to go on to part 2, or do we want to give a second to like let any of the participants answer? Roswitha, what are you thinking? You want to just keep going?
I would like to proceed with the round table thing and then open the discussion to, you know, kind of stay in the time frame.
Sounds good.
Is that good?
Yep.
Right. Okay, so after, you know, we showed the discussion, the idea was to open up the discussion or the exchange here and have experts from other areas doing their own work on graffiti and other things in the visual studies, whatever approach. And we have Katarina Turan with us and Kostas Kanakis. And the idea is to first have Katarina say some words about her work, or if you want to comment on the exhibition, you know, do whatever you like. The floor will be yours in a minute. And then I would like to have Kostas tell us something about his work, and I will introduce him in a minute too. So I'm very glad to have the two of you here, and because it also, you know, gives us a nice opportunity to go beyond our exhibition and actually show that there's more work than we do. I mean, we already have very different perspectives here, and now we're even opening it up and having more different perspectives, which I think is great. So Katarina Turan holds a postdoc position at the Slavic Studies Institute at the University of Vienna, and she did her PhD at Humboldt University in Berlin. And Katarina has been working on a lot of different interesting things related to Slavic studies, next to scripts and ideologies of script use in Croatia mostly. She did also work on borderland creation, especially in her PhD, on border studies, pretty much related to that, of course, and on minority languages and much more. But, you know, for you to be here today is, of course, you're interested in language and script use, which is what we are today concentrating on, and your expertise on language in the public space. And I think from what I heard, you know, you will somehow take us beyond Southeast Europe, but still we will stay in the linguistic context. So, Katarina, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roswitha, and thank you to the organizers. I'm really sorry that I could not come to Rijeka to see the exhibition, but it's great to have this opportunity to at least see it online, because you've done great work, and it is so interesting. When you just went through the pictures, I actually almost in each presentation I found motifs I found too. So I think that we have a lot of connection here, and I guess that my task or my idea today is to show you that graffiti connected to Southeastern Europe may be found way beyond Southeastern Europe, namely Vienna. So this is, I just want to briefly present you material I found with my students in spring 2019, I had a seminar on linguistic landscape studies connected in a Slavistic context, of course. And together with my students, I did field work over the semester. And the idea was to trace South Slavic languages in Vienna. Why Vienna? I guess that it is quite familiar that actually there is a huge diaspora with a South Slavic background in Austria's capital. Just to give you some numbers, in like the last statistical data for 2018, I found we have people with Serb origin ranking on the first spot, then Bosnian following on the 5th, and Croatian on the 8th rank in terms of migration background in Vienna. So South Slavic languages, you can hear them everywhere in Vienna. You actually can't walk the streets without hearing either, you know, Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian, Slovene, Bulgarian, whatsoever. So my idea was to show students that you can not only hear the languages, but that you can also see them in the Viennese linguistic landscape. And it was pretty much, as Vjeran just mentioned, as I started to show them how you can do such research, in the end of the semester, they came like, I can't stop seeing it all over. I don't know where to look because I can't stop seeing all these linguistic signs. And I was like, yeah, this is what happens when you start with a research like this. So what we did is we worked with the Linguiscape app, which might be familiar to some of you, which is a project from a linguist from, I think, the Netherlands, who developed it, which is pretty much also a citizen science approach. But I like it very much for such a project because you can add taxonomies in the app for your project. So what you can do is when you take the pictures, you can upload them in the app and then already put taxonomies on your pictures, and then you can like cross and see what comes out in the end. And what we did is, of course, we could not do all of Vienna, but we decided to go for 3 specific areas, 2 of them in the 15th and 16th district. For those of you who are not familiar with Vienna as a city, it's pretty much like a snail house. You have the city center, then you have the boulevard and the inner districts, and then the outer districts. And then in the outer districts, you have pretty much the highest migrant population. So we took 2 of the outer districts, and specifically one street called Ottakringer Straße, which is in Vienna familiar as Balkanstraße. So whenever you mention Balkanstraße in a Viennese context, everybody knows that you mean Ottakringer Straße, because there is all the way along, you have cafes, nightclubs, shops, restaurants, whatsoever, with any kind of South Slavic or post-Yugoslav background. So we took this street, and we took another street, Äußere Marilferstraße, which is also quite a huge boulevard that developed in the last years as some kind of second Balkanstraße. You have there pitare, you have cafes with like post-Yugoslav background. So these were our 2 areas, and we took the bus station in Vienna because you have daily leaving, I don't know, numerous buses from Ljubljana to Varna, Bitola, wherever. So these were this was our like research field, and we collected around 500 pictures. And it's quite similar to what Roswitha just said. We were not looking only in graffiti. So just to make it clear in the beginning, it was not only graffiti that was our focus, but any kind of linguistic sign in the South Slavic languages. But when I just maybe to give a condensation of applied taxonomies, we had graffiti about 10% of our data. But most of the graffiti had a political context. So maybe this is where it's overlapping and where it really sticks to what you guys did. I just saw in the okay, Roswitha, thank you. Vjeran, I saw that you wrote the name of the app, and Roswitha, thank you. You posted it. So it's really great. Everyone can just log in and do research wherever you want to. I can show you some pictures of what we found. I hope you can see my PowerPoint. Yeah, okay. The most prominent or most repetitive motif with a political message was the Serbian cross with the 4 Cyrillic S acronym, which we found on walls, on bus stops, on trash bins, which is the last one here. You can even see it doubled, over sticked with another message, but still very visible. So you can see that this was really the most prominent motif of all. It is, of course, also reactions to this sign. You can here see it's either like crossed out. We have it overpainted by this anarchist A. We have here also like a crossing out of the sign, and it's of course also in a dialogue, so to say, in a conflictive dialogue with Croatian nationalist signs, which you can see here on the left. And unfortunately I deleted the second half of the picture where it wrote Bog I Hrvati. So obviously the Cyrillic S was the first one, and then it was covered by blue. And I liked really very much what you said about the colors earlier, because here I'm pretty sure that this blue color is very much also related to Dinamo Zagreb and Bad Blue Boys, which we will see in another picture later on. So the Cyrillic U, you can also find, the Ustasha U, you can find in various contexts, and especially in this big boulevard separating the inner districts from the other districts. So where Balkanstraße actually starts, or Ottakringer Straße, you can find very strong like marking of territory, either with the Cyrillic or with the Ustasha U. So it's really, you can see that there is some kind of a claiming of territory and conflictive discourse going on. This sign, of course, is also crossed out in some contexts, and here is what I just mentioned, also this context with the soccer fan clubs. This is actually what was most of the graffiti, had some kind of relation to soccer. So here you can see the Bad Blue Boys sign in this typical blue. So it's actually, I think it's the same blue, although it's as in the sign before, but it's in a totally different neighborhood. And a reaction to it, like Pičke Ustaške. So you can also see that there is an ongoing dialogue at least I think like 90% of the graffiti, there is some kind of response. And you can also see conflicts of the soccer clubs from Belgrade, so Bečki Grobari, which is crossed out in green. And then on the other one, you can see Delije, and SCR, which is overpainted, is the Viennese Sportklub Rapid. So like Grobari and Delije, or Partizan and Red Star, you have in Vienna Rapid Wien and Austria Wien, which I even think that the ultra fan clubs are somehow related. So I think that this is some kind of also response in terms of marking territory of fan club zones. And what we did also find is some kind of political conflicts in the course of Yugoslav wars, such as Kosovo is Serbia, Kosovo is Serbia, or Šiptari, we will kill you, UČK, and then here Zapamtite Vukovar, or Knin. But what was obvious to me is that here, for instance, it's written in English. So I interpreted that the recipient of this message is a different one than in the other conflicts we had earlier, in the other messages we had earlier. And for the end, this was actually my most beloved picture, Naš kraj. It's not so clear, not so ever clear who is Naš in this context, because Naš in like in the South Slavic context can be, depending on the context, everyone and everywhere. And what you can see here also is this čbe bre, which is čbe is Šatrovački for Beč. And this was also one of the most prominent motifs, but not so much on graffiti, but on stickers. So we also had stickers, and I'm really looking forward to the conference in Zres, where I'm going to present more of the sticker part, because it's quite the hugest part of what we collected. And you can see that really territory is marked, and there are some you can see that I interpreted it as some kind of claiming of visibility in this migrant context and in these neighborhoods. So it's really fascinating, and I agree with you that the fieldwork never stops. So I still have the project open on my mobile phone, and I'm just collecting and collecting and collecting, even without my students, because it's so interesting that you can see how territory is marked in, like, even in this setting in a urban context which is outside the post-Yugoslav space. So you can see that South Slavic linguistic landscapes are highly present in Vienna, and this would be my input for the discussion.
Great, thanks a lot, Katarina. I mean, there's so much to ask you, and I'm sure we will in a minute, but I would just maybe go on for now and have Kostas also share his inputs, so that then afterwards we can, you know, go in the open discussion, or maybe yeah, just concentrate on some more aspects, all of us together. So Kostas Kanakis, I'm going to introduce you now. Kostas is a professor of social linguistics at the Department of Social Anthropology and History at the University of the Aegean on the island of Lesbos, and previously studied in Athens before doing his PhD at the University of Chicago, teaching in Princeton, Athens, and Thessaloniki. So a lot of work having been done here. Kostas also has broad research interests, I should say, and all related to language, more or less, and with a clear focus on pragmatics and ethnographic linguistics. Kostas is the editor of the Open Access Aegean Working Papers in Ethnographic Linguistics, which is also important to mention, and he is the founder of the Laboratory for Ethnographic Approaches to the Study of Language. And I've been collaborating with and also getting inspired by Kostas' work a lot, and since attending one of his summer schools on Lesbos on gender, sexuality, and the Balkans in 2013. And I'm, you know, looking forward to hearing your comments or your input and your own impressions of your extended work on linguistic landscape and graffiti in Southeastern Europe, because I know they took you all over the place, and that you've been working in places like Koper and Dubrovnik, but also in Mytilene and Belgrade. So please, Kostas.
Well, thank you so much. What can I say? It has been a binge for me to listen to all of you and to watch the pictures. I was completely taken aback by Kevin's fascinating video, because I was wondering how to let people see what you are seeing during field work, when on one day you see a sign and you see this kind of intervention, which, where I come from, is called intertextuality. Of course, it is intervention, but the end product is an intertextual message. So I will take it from the beginning. I have kept some notes about what it might be worth saying so as to make sense. First of all, I realized from all of you as you introduced yourselves and your work that you're coming from different places, and yet what you all do seems to be cutting-edge linguistic landscape research. Whether you are starting from culture studies or history or political science or linguistics. Now, what I saw is not graffiti, of course, because my interest is not graffiti. I'm a linguist, a social linguist at that, who has been doing work on LL. So graffiti for me, and people like Roswitha, I suppose, and other linguists, is primarily graphemes instead of phonemes, and which have to do with language, but not language as understood as outside of linguistics. For me, there are graphemes and there are morphemes. So I see it as a social linguist who is not really interested in counting languages, counting whether directions are in French or English anymore. Not that I ever did. So for me, graffiti was just the most fascinating item in the linguistic landscape. There could be extra semiotic information, such as pictures, or no pictures. So what I'm trying to say is that by now, linguistic landscape research is wide enough to encompass all kinds of semiosis, but I wouldn't go as far as to include all kinds of street art into that. It has to be deictic, it has to be indexical, it has to be translatable to some kind of language rather quickly, in the nick of time, like anything we say, any utterance can be translated into something somehow in the nick of time. So I start from this clarification, which is meant not to undermine anything, but to actually say that what I'm going to say really focuses on language as understood in linguistics. So I have lived and worked in parts of the world that were mentioned today. I have been a linguist, a social linguist, a traveler, a family member, a friend, even a representative of a not so friendly nation in Croatia. I have spent months on end in Dubrovnik, where my personal life has been for a very long time, not anymore, but it has been a period. I have spent months on end in Serbia, in Belgrade mostly, where I have had colleagues and friends, and I was equally a foreigner, but supposedly of a more friendly nation, always supposedly, as Greece voted for NATO to bombard Belgrade. So always supposedly. So I have found myself in the difficult position of having to see, not really watch, having to countenance hate speech everywhere, including where I live, of course. I have found othering practices, and since my interest at the time in all places I was, especially Dubrovnik, Belgrade, Athens, and Mytilene, was the chronicling of whatever was happening politically at the time, and the time is very long. I'm talking 2006 to 2021. It has been a very edifying experience, a really edifying experience to hear all of you, from Eric's historicization, or better, looking at historical graffiti in Istria, which gets me to a few of my pictures of the Ne damo svoje from Kotor, however, written early, written as a, how shall I say, actually carved on stone over the gate of Kotor. I'm sharing. So you will allow me some back and forth. Here, Kotor, tuđe nećemo, svoje ne damo. For me, that was very interesting. Rosvita's Vukovar nikad Vukovar Čirilickom brought back a lot of memories. For example, this from Belgrade, where a certain very benign inscription on, I don't know if you see it. Can you see it? Am I still sharing? I'm supposed to be screen sharing.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, so.
But it's still the Kotor one.
Oh, still the Kotor one for you?
Yes.
Okay, no, I'm not interested in the Kotor one anymore. I'm interested in this. It has been paused. It says resume share. No, I'm interested in wait, this. Can you see Pisimo Cyrillic?
I think you have to get out of the PowerPoint share and then reshare the other, if it's a different
I'm sorry,
screen.
yeah, you are right. You are right. Okay, so this work comes from joint work with Roswitha. Let me share it. So if this was in Belgrade already in 2009, a month or two after the infamous Pride of 2009, this appears much later and has to do with Ulica Cara Lazara not being allowed to appear in Latin. And of course, suddenly by 2016, much later than Croatia, but it doesn't matter, we have Negujmo Srpski jezik posted in basically every library and every bookstore in the city. So what I heard from you two guys, and what I heard from Vjeran and Kevin, and what I heard from Katarina, to which I come next, has been movingly familiar. I'm so vying to meet you, to see how your take on things, to look at your material from a closer look. To go to Vjeran's work, monuments in the LL have been slowly but steadily becoming a staple of LL studies for linguists and cultural study specialists ever since at least 2009, when Ilana Shoami and Soji Waxman worked on the commemoration of the 100 years of Tel Aviv. Their interest might have been more about the absence of Arabic being, at the time, not now, one of the two languages that the Constitution of Israel understands as official, designates as official, but they also talked about a lot of the things that I understood are probably your point of departure. I might be wrong. The idea of commemorating in landscape, which might be linguistic, which might be pictorial, and of course, it might very well be sculptural, if I remember correctly from your majestic pictures of social realism. So a lot of that is currently cutting-edge research for a lot of people internationally. What I can contribute to this is how monuments are often used to inscribe current concerns, especially in Greece, concerns that are not supposed to be very likable to the nation. So lesbian women who felt persecuted by the Golden Dawn in Greece, at least between 2009 and 2013, chose to write things like faggots and lesbians are proudly the shame of the nation, on the statue of Kolokotronis, who's the major hero of the liberation from the Ottoman Empire. And we have the square before the old parliament with flagstones, and they made a chessboard out of it. White flagstones were painted in red with this message in a checkerboard fashion for about 1 square kilometer. Of course, they were whitewashed before anybody could take their own pictures. It happened at night, but you can still see the remains of the day. Erasure doesn't work wonders, even if paint is not what it used to be. So the Neće proći in Belgrade regarding the Gay Pride Parade of 2009, when erased from the Moskva Hotel fountain, was still there, very visible as a shadow for the next 5 years. And they kept erasing it, but it was still always there. No matter how futile a camera you used, you could still catch a shadow. So that is something that people like us can take into consideration. I will show you a few things about Athens. A couple of things about Athens. Wait. I will use, can you see this? No, that's, no. Well, it doesn't really matter. I don't want to take much time. I just want to say that Kevin's work on action, reaction, recreation, erasure leaves traces. And this is something that can be of interest to both historians and artwork commentators, but of course to linguists as well. And I made a lot of notes, but I will not go on. I just wanted to say how Bečki grobari reminded me of grobari Yugoslavia, which is of course everywhere in Dorčol, and which, as a goddamn foreigner myself, thought was referring to undertakers before I knew anything about football. Still, it is very interesting that at the end of 2011, when I spent many months in Belgrade researching Dorčol and Stari Grad, the same 10 streets up and down about 8 hours a day, resulting in a few thousand pictures, only a few of which can be discussed, I think. It kept coming to my head that, of course, locals understand grobari like anybody else. And grobari still means undertakers. So that's food for thought. Thank you very much for presenting us with such rich material. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kostas, for adding to the rich material. And I think it perfectly worked out. We now have this bigger frame thanks to the two of you here, and you know, the wider perspective, which I think is just great. With a look at the clock, I would say that I mean, I had actually prepared to ask all of us or you a round of questions, but I think it would be nice to have the discussion opened up now for everyone. And I would just like to do that right now, to open up and have we're still 44 people here, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions and interesting maybe insights. And I would like, so whoever has a question, please just go forward and ask us. Or comments.
Would you mind me going ahead? Is that okay?
Sorry?
Would you mind me going ahead? Is that okay? Fine.
This is great.
Yeah, thank you. Katarina, may I ask you a question? I'm not an expert on murals or graffitis or gangs or football hooligans, but I was wondering how the Vienna case is connected to this global phenomena of marking territory by gangs and group of young people. And I think the most well-known example, at least in popular culture, is the case of Los Angeles and the Central American and African American gangs and their territories and messages and drive-bys and violence and all that. So I was just wondering how the Vienna case is linked to that global, larger issue. That would be very interesting, I think, to grasp.
Thank you for the question. I can't answer it at all because it's actually a question I'm posing myself too, how it's linked to like more international phenomenon. But what we can observe is that we can see these interconnections of ultra fan clubs, like international. I wouldn't say maybe worldwide, but at least in a European context. I'm actually, this soccer topic is something I left for further research, because I'm also very much interested in what actually happens here, because it's not only the graffiti I showed you, but I had stickers like from all the ultra fan clubs from Southeastern Europe. We found in Vienna in only one street. So it is at least my interpretation is that it is for sure claiming of territory, like this street or this cafe or this part belongs to us, for instance, because you also have fan shops of the corresponding soccer clubs also in Vienna on this street. So there is for sure something going on. Yeah, this is all I can tell you for now, but maybe the guys from of you who did research in Zagreb can tell something about that in the Zagreb context or in the Belgrade context with the soccer clubs here having this strong rivalry, because it's always also a political context. It's never only soccer, I guess. Maybe to give you the ball.
Well, I mean, I think in Zagreb, a lot of the graffiti more recently is against Mamić, and like all the different Mamić Turčine, Mamić Srbine, and it's all these things, Mamić Hrvatine. So it's a lot like the fan clubs actually are against the ownership. So that was, I would say, in the landscape. But yeah, that is a good question. I don't know how to tie it to the U.S. context, because I think that the sports fans just function a little bit differently in the U.S. It's not the same kind of politics there. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe if my colleague Dario Brentin is observing, he's the expert on those things. But I really enjoyed the transnational aspect of the graffiti that Katarina, you presented, because I've also wandered around Vienna and taken photos of these little examples, and the fact that you also bring up stickers, which we didn't really discuss, but that's also definitely some kind of intervention in public space. Maybe there's another question or comment. Tanya has a question.
It's not so much a question as just noticing the question of what naš kraj means. Usually you see it here as a naš kraj, naša pravila. So it's like our area, our laws, our rules. So that might be just something that might help later if it does. Thanks. And thank you everyone for the fascinating presentations. This has been really great.
Or any students of mine that are out there? Do you have any comments? Oh, see, Charles has a question.
Yes, hello. No video. I hope audio is okay. My internet connection is not great right now.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think it was Roswitha, or I think it was Roswitha that mentioned the word veterans, was talking about veterans alongside with the Bad Blue Boys, or that might have been a little bit later in the talk. I'm not sure if I'm recollecting correctly, but I wanted to kind of just put it out there in a specific sense and in a general sense. If anybody's actually been speaking with some of the veterans and soliciting opinions or thoughts on some of the graffiti, which is just, all over in some of these really critical areas of memory and public spaces, and also in a more general sense about the veteran perspectives on that graffiti, just in a more generalized sense. So looking at specific voices of veterans, and also just kind of looking at, the perspectives from a veteran position. So I just want to kind of ask for a little bit more development on that.
I didn't hear you that well, Charles, but you did ask for veterans' opinions on the work, I think. And I did, as a matter of fact, speak, for example, to one of the, because I've been looking at like older pictures of what I'm taking, pictures of now, and I've been talking to archives and museums, or people in archives and museums, and I was then pointed to a photographer who also was a soldier on the Croatian side during Oluja and before, and he had a bunch of very, very interesting pictures, for example, and told me that, much about the background also when they were not taken, but when the graffitis actually were painted on the walls and who did it, and so I am, of course, also very, very sure that it is important to have different perspectives in here. And I think, I mean, I do look at in archive material a lot, and it is very clear that, of course, there are, these layers I was trying to talk about too are very important here, but in all our work, I mean, there's always you can always see the reaction and the status quo on the walls now, but you don't so much see what has been on there before in many instances, if it's not very urbanized areas, as Kostas and Kevin said, that there really is a dialogue and graffiti wars or something really current going on, and in Katarina's material too. But if you happen to work in rural areas much more as I do, and probably Eric is also concerned with that aspect of the field work, a lot of the stuff has actually been on there for decades. And the stuff that is not appreciated has been gone very fast and is not visible, of course, anymore. And so it's a very homogenic, perspective also you get when looking at these more rural areas where you see a lot of things on ruins, for example, where nobody actually goes near the building anymore, because it's also dangerous to enter these buildings, of course. And so this is another reason why things are still on there and are not, there is no dialogue taking place, but this is only, some, one aspect, I think.
Well, maybe I could just, follow up on that, because a lot of his, the units that were like involved in certain actions would then mark, they would leave their, the name of the unit, like the 4th Brigade or the 105th Motorized Division or whatever it is. And so it's interesting that, I mean, this must be a soldier activity, and maybe Charles, you have other insights and other theaters of war about that. But I would say maybe I'm like, as veterans engaging in graffiti action, those of you who were in Croatia during the height of the ICTY and when Gotovina was in the Hague, and they were like his trial, that like the landscape was covered in these Gotovina images and Oslobodi Generale, and so there was all these, let's say, messages about branitelji and the veterans and the generals, and specifically, so it was quite prevalent. And now that's most of that is gone. I think the Slobodi Generale is still in the hospital in Draškovićevo. You can still see it on that wall. But that was just like the billboards and all that. Maybe I'll discuss a bit of that also on Sres, even though now we see it shifting towards these very elaborate artistic murals that are now kind of sprouting up. I don't know if that contributes to the discussion or not. Anybody else have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I would like to ask a question to Eric Ušić. about the Second World War graffiti, for me, is the most interesting issue. You mentioned many graffiti in Italian in favor of Tito, of course, in favor of the winners. For example, Viva il potere popolare, sempre con Tito, Viva Stalin, 900 combattenti, and so on. But just a part of Italian people in Istria was socialist, of course. I don't know, maybe the majority, the minority, but of course a part. My question is, are there graffiti about the exodus of Italian population? I'm not talking about fascist graffiti, but about graffiti with an ethnic component related to the exodus, for example. Goodbye my home, goodbye Fiume, goodbye Pola, we will miss you. I don't know, I make some hypotheses. There is something like that or not?
So thank you for this question. There is, I mean, you can find it even on YouTube, a short documentary propagandistic video from the pro-Italian side. I think it's 10 minutes long, Pola città che muore or Pola città dolente. And at the end of the video, you can see a montage of, I think, 4 or 5 different families writing Viva l'Italia in their home, not on the outside, but in their home. So implying that we can't write it outside. The facades are for the pro-Yugoslav. No, we can just keep it for ourselves. I didn't find any graffiti related to the exodus that are still there in public space, but I found some photos in secondary literature. So just, let's say, archival from archives. That's the only thing I found until now. But good question. I think that they used to wrote graffiti as farewell to Istria, but inside their home. That's for sure.
Any other comments or questions? I mean, we're coming up to 2 hours now.
Just a comment. I think it would be very interesting to also include the use of social media in researching these very interesting graffitis, especially when they have a contemporary connotation, because there are these football ultra groups. I would just call them hooligans probably, but they have very strong online presence. They have their YouTube videos with millions of viewers and their internet forums with widespread, very inappropriate propaganda and ideas. And it could be, and photo portals. So there is a lot of very strong online presence. So it could be an interesting way to combine the physical evidence that is still out there and the online presence.
Well, again, I think it's interesting, like what I've been looking at these murals also about the war in the 1990s, was that these hooligan groups or ultras who were doing basically vandalism and these sort of subversive graffitis are now being paid and organized to do big, very artistic murals. I mean, one example is in Crikvenica. I think there was a new Vukovar mural, for example. So I think, and these are, of course, posted also on their websites and Facebook pages, as you've said. So I think that's a great site to like get into. I mean, that'd be the next step, at least for my research, is to maybe try to talk to some of these artists that are now taking the next step in the landscape. So not just subversive Ustasha signs, but creating artistic depictions of either soldiers or operations like Operation Storm. Should we maybe wrap up then, if there's no more questions or comments?
Yeah, I think we could. Just looking around, but there are no hands raised or anything. So, do you want to wrap up, Vjeran?
Well, sure. I guess I'd like to thank the authors again, Sanja and the Center for Advanced Studies for hosting this to also create a good audience, and my students that endured the entire time, and our two guests for the second part, Katarina and Kostas. I mean, I chance to meet Kostas for the first time, maybe next chance to be live, and especially with Katarina, if you make it out to Tres next month. I think it was it's always fun to share some of our field work with others, and hopefully you found it interesting. And check out the exhibition, which is in on campus, although I guess you've seen it all. Maybe our next step is to maybe put it online as well. We'll think about that. But I don't know if anyone else, Sanja, did you want to have any final comments as well? No? Yeah?
No, thanks a lot. It has been a great event. I'm thankful to Roswitha, to Vjeran, to Kevin, to Kostas, to Eric, to Katarina, all of you, because it was very, very good. The recording will be available, and I do believe that you all agree to publish it so that all can see it even later on. And I'm very much looking forward to have you all in Tres and for the conference, May conference.
Okay, well, good luck graffiti hunting and mural hunting for all you out there, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time, and
Thank
have a nice
you.
afternoon.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.